Hello, everyone. Probably a lot of you don't know who I am. My name is Nick. I have a podcast. It's usually in Bulgarian, but today we have a very special guest who's called Joos. He's a good friend of ours. He's currently the leading YouTube strategist. My words. Maybe he would agree. Maybe he would disagree. We'll see about that. He was working for quite a long time with Mr. Beast and helping him drive the growth that he currently enjoys. And he's also the strategist for many of the biggest YouTube channels that are blowing up right now. We're not going to discuss specific on that. We're going to discuss specifics on strategy, how to deal with YouTube, what's his data-driven approach to retention and to growth, actually in all social media platforms. And I'm sure it's going to be a really amazing conversation. Welcome, Mario.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited about this. We've talked about this before, and I know that you're going to have some very fun questions.
Yeah.
So I'm excited, and don't hold back. I'm going to say this. If you doubt anything I say, just ask me for data or ask me how I come to it, because what you said as well, data is where it's at.
Yeah, I love people who base their decisions on data, because obviously a lot of people say that, myself included, and sometimes like what stands behind the words data driven is like some research, but I know you're really thorough. So I know when you say it, it's like a lot of data, properly managed data, properly aggregated data.
Yep.
So you have some, I hope, unique insights into psychology. Do you know this guy named George Mack?
Doesn't ring a bell instantly.
He's a marketer, really good marketer, super smart guy. Anyway, he has this idea that video game designers and people on broader, more fringe professions like for example, being a super high level YouTube strategist, know more about human psychology than actual psychologists, and that's really fun because I think it kind of is true to an extent. So that's what I hope to extract from you today. But before that, I wanted to ask you about your background, because you weren't born like a YouTube strategist. So where did you start your career from?
I started my career, I would say like 10 years ago, I think. Mm-hmm. So before all this, I was actually a professional gamer. So there was in 2014. So this goes like 10 years back. I didn't want to go the traditional route anymore. I didn't want to do the studying thing or anything like that.
How old were you back then?
Let's give some context. That's like 20 years old. So I was 20 years old. I think maybe I was 19 because I'm born late. But I tried the university thing. I tried the high school thing. It just wasn't for me. It bored me a lot of times. It wasn't interesting. I didn't like going to school. I would procrastinate. And instead of studying, what I would do is I would play Counter-Strike, which is like a video game. Because I just liked it. And at some point I decided I want to become a professional gamer. That's what I want to do. Why? Because a lot of 16-year-olds at that time, well, I would say now as well, are like, oh, that's the coolest thing out there. And to me, I was like, well, that's also the most impossible thing out there. So I was like, that's exactly what I want to chase. I want to prove to myself that what I believe is impossible to achieve, I can achieve. So at that time, I quit university. I quit everything. I left a lot of things behind. And I just became I didn't just become a professional gamer. I started playing games day in, day out, specifically Counter-Strike, and I thought I was going to go pro in Counter-Strike. So I played that for a few years. How I made my living at the time, because I did have to pay rent to my parents and stuff, is that I coached people or I live streamed. So I did Twitch streaming at that time as well. And then eventually, things didn't go that well. I became really good at the game, but I didn't go pro. And that's when a game called PUBG came out, which was one of the biggest games at the time. And that game, I was like, they have a leaderboard. That's really cool. Counter-Strike didn't have a leaderboard. And I got really obsessed with this leaderboard. I was like, okay, top 500. Let me try to get in there. Ooh, top 200. Ooh, top 100. But it becomes an addiction. It becomes an obsession. And at some point, we reached number 1. And then that was cool, but I was like, okay, I want to go way beyond this. I want to win a major tournament. So there was this 100K Twitch rival tournament, which had like some of the most well-known streamers and people from that game, and we won that tournament as well. And then I was like, okay, I'm not enough. We need number 1 in Europe. We need number 1 in A. And we kept on doing these things, and that obsession kept growing. But what happened then is that along that way, I met a lot of very well-known creators, such as PewDiePie, who I've also played some tournaments with, Kwebbelkop, and a few other names. These are larger YouTube creators. So that was my first touch with really YouTube. And at some point I was like, okay, the gaming industry doesn't pay very well, so I cannot support a family one day. So I have to think about moving on. And that's when I messaged this guy called Quebecop, who at the time had about, I think, 10 million subscribers or something. And I messaged him and said, like, I don't like what you're doing here. Do it like this because it's going to make you look bad. And at that time he said, like, you know, there's this thing called the YouTube algorithm. Are you interested in this one? I'm like, yeah, that sounds very intriguing. And he said, how about this? How about you come work for me? How about we figure out if the strategy that you use in gaming, if it will apply to YouTube and figuring out the YouTube algorithm. So long story short, going from there, I told him, look, if I'm going to drop this gaming thing where I have this obsession with being the best, I want to be the absolute best strategist that this industry has at the moment. So he was like, you want to be the best? I'll introduce you to the best, which was very, knock on wood, actually not knock on wood. I was very fortunate at that time. So he introduced me to a guy called CeeLo. And CeeLo is somebody that most people will not have heard of. But he was Jimmy's or Mr.Beast's business partner. And he was one of the big geniuses behind ideation strategies and stuff. So I met him and he knew me from the gaming for some reason. He happened to have seen a tournament that I was playing in. And he's like, hey, why don't you come work for us? So within just 6 months of starting in this industry of YouTube and trying to figure out the algorithm, I already had an offer on the table to work for the Mr.Beast team, who, I mean, at that time, they were already really big. I instantly, actually, fun enough, initially I said no because I was like, oh, I have this one client. He brought me in this industry. I have to stick with this one client. But then eventually I realized as well that, okay, this Mr.Beast team is not a small team. And the offer became really good.
That was when? Because you've worked with Mr.Beast for a long time. And this is like the beginning of your story.
Yeah, so this is the beginning of my story. I think this was 4 years ago at this point. Yeah, around 4 years ago.
Oh, so around the time we met actually, before you went to the US.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, okay. Like I didn't, well, yeah, I would say so. I would say so. And so I worked with the Mr.Beast team. Initially, I was here in Bulgaria while working with them remote. And then eventually they asked me, hey, why don't you just do strategy here with us, but you come in-house. You come literally to America and come live with us and do strategy on location. So moved there, did strategy on location, worked on really cool project. The coolest project I worked on was Squid Game video. That was just being in that set and just being like, wow, there's 400 plus people and we have to manage a game and redesign a game in a way that we can actually make it happen in real life. That was like one of the coolest experiences. So working on those things, flew back a few times to Bulgaria, America, and eventually we actually moved to America, stayed there. And I think long to then end up the story where we're in right now, because I don't work with him anymore, is after a while working with him, and this is going to sound crazy to a lot of people, but I was like, okay, every single day in the office, it's another 100 million view video. Oh, it's another 100 million view video. First, that's really cool. But if that's like your 10th or your 12th video, the views themselves don't make it interesting anymore. And also the Beast team started expanding. The culture started changing. And then I was like, I want to have a bigger impact. I want to go way bigger than Beast. And that was a crazy thought. So I didn't just instantly leave there. I was like, okay, I spent half a year thinking about how I'm going to approach this. How am I going to beat what I have at Beast right now? So that's when I left the Beast team and I said, I want to have an impact on all creators. I'm going to stop working with a singular person. I'm going to start working with more people. I left the Beast team. Now I work with like about 10 clients. One of those clients actually is the Stokes twins, who are the fastest growing channel on YouTube. So I started working with them. We've got a great relationship going on as well. And that's what I do right now.
20 to 100 million in 6 months, right?
Yeah, they grew very fast.
Yeah, so I mean, that's insane. We're going to talk about that, but I want to stop you here and ask a question and bring you way back to the beginning of your story. You mentioned to the first content creator, his name is a bit hard for me, so I forgot it. But you told him, do this, it's going to be better, but you didn't even know about the YouTube algorithm.
Yeah, so
what was your intuition? Like, how do you have the confidence to even say something like this?
I think one of the big things is that what happened at that time is that he started changing his personal brand, right? And he started going more aggressive. And he started actually, just putting it very blunt, sounding like an asshole. So one of the things, it doesn't take a strategist who understands the YouTube algorithm and stuff to really understand that, you know, if you say this, you kind of sound like an asshole. So for me to say, hey, stop doing that, you sound like an asshole, that's not good, that's not congruent with who you are, and also this is how it will make your audience feel. It doesn't take deep strategists to realize that and understand that. So for me to tell that, that was the beginning of everything. And then the algorithm made me realize, when he started making me look into this one, I started realizing all these data signals, they're simply how people feel. And that's what's okay. My first advice to him was just how I felt reading his stuff. But then, you know, working with him, I realized, hey, there's this data that doesn't tell me how I feel, that tells me how millions of people feel. So, and that's kind of where we mentioned with psychology, that's really where the psychology comes into play, is that at the end of the day, we, with YouTube and stuff, and the YouTube algorithm is just measuring how people feel and how people think about your content. And when we just read data, it doesn't say us exactly what is wrong, but it gives us a very clear indication like, hey, you are now doing this action. People are dropping out. Maybe that action is bad. Maybe people didn't like it. So let's now figure out why people don't like it. And that's kind of what happened. So even though I didn't know much, at that time, I could use my intuition a little bit. And now I'm just like, the data is the intuition of many people. So,
but I would say, because I know you a bit more, that you're really good at pattern recognition. So even though for you it seemed obvious, probably for a lot of people it didn't. And you also said something else which is curious for me, and that was that he invited you to try the same strategies that you tried with gaming into YouTube. So what are those strategies? Because to me, gaming is like, it's a bit more removed than, let's say, YouTube.
So when you think about professional gamers, most people just think about people who spend a lot of time in the game. And that's true, yes. I
actually coach one of the top Dota 2 players in the world. So I kind of know.
Yeah, you know. But so you know as well that it's not just putting the hours in. It's a lot of trying to think outside the box, create new metas. And a meta is like a strategy that people currently use. If everybody uses the strategy, you got to figure out what the next strategy is that people are going to use. So one of the things that I was really good at the time is trying to figure out, okay, what are things that nobody's thinking about? So I'll come with an example. One of the big examples that we had, and I'm trying to visualize this as well for those who don't know the game itself. But imagine that you're driving a car and in a building, there's people with guns and they shoot at you. Well, if you have to slow down, they have more time to kill you, right? That's a big problem. So in that game, I was like, what if I jump out of the car? Or what if I crash into the building at full speed? Do I die? Yes, I died. So I was like, well, is there something about the way that the game is programmed that I can utilize to my advantage to make sure that I can go full speed against this building without dying? And I realized that you had a vertical movement and a horizontal movement. And when you jump out of a car while it's driving and there's a wall and you jump out right before you hit that wall, it wouldn't register a certain part of the game. So you could literally go full speed ahead against the building, jump out right before you hit the building, and then you take no damage. And this decreased the chance that you would die trying to fight somebody in a building. And that strategy alone won us a lot of fights in the game, which was very important because, you know, you die, you lose the game. So those kind of strategies, that was one of the strategies. There was many other strategies. This creator that I worked with, he knew that I was able to come up with those strategies. And coming up with those strategies simply is thinking, okay, this is what everybody thinks. Let's try some crazy stuff. And a lot of times it's just, you know, throwing spaghetti at the wall, nothing sticks. But at some point, something sticks. And that's what I was really good at. It's just outside the box thinking, trying to break the mechanisms, trying to figure out how the game works. And fun enough, it's not just me. It's if you ask a lot of top pro players, because I spent a lot of time with somebody who's like one of the best League of Legends coaches of all time. They look into how the game is programmed in order to identify the small little advantages they could have.
The exploits.
The exploits, pretty much. So take a person who is really good at that and then put them with this thing called YouTube algorithm. Well, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to figure out how to exploit this. And when you exploit it, you start to understand how it works. And exploiting the YouTube algorithm is very difficult. But you learn about, hey, what does it say about humans, all this and that. And actually, when I talk to YouTube, I always tell them, because sometimes I have these conversations, I tell them, look, my goal is to break your algorithm and to figure out everything that's wrong with it. And I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm doing so you can fix it. And then there's this constant game. But as I have these conversations with them, I also they are also very helpful in helping me understand the algorithm better. Because I could say that I figured this all out on my own, but if it wasn't for some of the YouTube employees helping me better understand, like, hey, Mario, your understanding here is wrong and this, I wouldn't fully understand it. And nobody can say that they fully understand it because it's an algorithm. But overall, that's pretty much how I went from gaming to this YouTube algorithm, is just outside the box thinking. Somebody recognizes that and it's like, hey. And that's actually fun enough. In business, a lot of top businesses, they actually hire gamers, and they hire people who are extremely successful in something random, and those become like their top employees. Even I got an employee. He's like a professional. He was a professional boxer, and I was like, interesting. You're good at this. You're good at boxing. Well, I am gonna assume that boxing is more than just throwing a punch. He's one of my top employees.
Yeah, because like even with gaming, a lot of people. Okay, a lot of kids that want to be pro gamers, they think that pro gamers became pro gamers because just played on and on for entertainment. But what they actually do is deliberate practice, right? They practice certain things, certain mechanics again and again and again. And that might not be that enjoyable because you're doing the same thing. You're not playing the game. You're just trying to do the one thing. And that's what boxers do. That's what, professionals in all disciplines do. They don't just randomly, chaotically play for enjoyment. They play with a purpose. And sometimes it's not that enjoyable, but it produces a good result when it matters. And that's kind of what you want in an employee, right? Being disciplined and being able to practice, becoming better at the job that you gave them. And obviously they'll outperform. Like a lot of the pro poker player, StarCraft 2 player, actually, sorry, not 2, the first one, players like buddies of mine, they're like super successful entrepreneurs because they have the discipline, they have the outside of the box thinking, exactly what you said. And this leads me to the question, like, what is a YouTube strategist? Because I don't think we explained that thus far.
We didn't. YouTube strategist is very simple. It's there's different ways that you could look at it, or different types of YouTube strategist. So you have the YouTube strategist who still does the script writing, comes up with the ideas and stuff. So I would say those are more execution-driven YouTube strategists. Operational strategist, let's call it like that. So they still have an understanding of the strategy, but they are more about implementing it. And I've done that as well. Somebody sends me a video, I leave some notes. I mean, even at the Beast team, I leave some notes like, hey, these are the changes. Here are the changes, why you have to do them. So that's more, executing. Recently, I've been more going towards the consulting as a strategist. So what I still do is I still analyze, you still have to put in the hours and you still have to put in the work. But then I come in and I'm like, okay, I'm going to look at your channel and I'm going to try to identify what are the flaws that you're making. And now I'm going to give you the knowledge to fix those flaws. So that's mainly what I do as a YouTube strategist, is that I just analyze your YouTube channel as a business. And I'm like, okay, you come across very unlikable because of these things that you're saying. And in your case, your likeness is very important. So here's why you're unlikable. Here are the elements that are going to make you more likable. So let's insert those elements in your video and remove some of the elements that make you unlikable. And because of optimizing like this, we're going to have more people want to watch for longer, or just more people watch your content in general. And this is just one example, but that's the kind of strategy that I do. So YouTube strategist is it's like consulting with business. They come to your business.
First layer is like literally personal branding. Like, what's your presentation in front of the world?
So for some people, so I had one client who gives advice for men, right? Okay. He's a large channel who gives advice how men have to talk to girls, how men have to dress. And sometimes it's just, how you have to groom, for example. Now, clearly, I don't groom. For me, it's just gone with the hair. But some people like you have a beard, right? You want to know how to trim it properly.
I have hair for now as well. So
okay, I'm
joining the club soon.
Yeah, you wait for it. So in his case, at some point, he was talking. And when he talks, he kind of looked next to the camera. He was kind of looking into the void, and like, those are little elements that affect how somebody likes you or how somebody connects with you. So let's fix those kind of things. And just fixing for him how he came across. Because if you're going to take advice from a man that you want to take advice on, you will need to, in a way, have some liking towards him and respect towards him that you're going to take and want his advice. So for him, that's very, very important. Right? It's like if you want some fitness advice, you want to make sure that the guy is fit, right? That's the same thing. So for some people, that's physical appearance. For some people, that's their behavior, especially if you're going to talk about behavior. So for those people, personal branding and how you look like, That's where the main advice goes. Now, let's say you're talking about a different type of creator. So I have a creator that I work with who's got about, I think, 17 million subscribers, and they target kids. They target like 8-year-old to 10-year-olds. Basically, their content, it's not so much about the personal branding. Like, these kids don't watch and be like, I want to be like this person.
It's purely entertainment.
It's purely entertainment. So at that point, we focus the strategy on visualization, for example. Like, hey, if you are saying that a horse is riding or coming towards you, do we see the horse, right? Do we visually see this? If I'm explaining you a concept, am I using animations to make it easier for you to understand it, for these kids to understand it, right? So the strategy and the focus on the strategy changes per channel. But again, yes, character likeness, in that case is less personal brand, but it's more character likeness because there's more characters, is also important. It's just the visualization just tends to be more important in those cases. So depending on what channel you have, the strategies, the focus on which strategy we're going to be discussing changes. Now, the actual strategies apply to pretty much all channels. And this is the cool thing about most strategies, is that I could character likeness in every single type of content you make. It will take place in some shape or form, right? It depends if you're doing characters or personal branding. But that's like, in a nutshell, pretty much, strategies, how they change and stuff.
But isn't there a separate element in strategy when you analyze the videos themselves and see like where do people drop off, where they're more engaged, and then you just fine tune further videos? Or
so the thing is, with the information that we get, so what we have in every single video is we have these things called retention charts, and retention charts give us information about when people drop off or when people stay. The issue with those things is that they typically only tell us what is the most urgent, pressing issues for that channel. So for example, let's say we're talking about something very boring, then during that part, people will drop off. And that gives us information that maybe that part is boring or the talking points weren't interesting enough. But that doesn't mean there's no more issues present. Or sometimes people stay. That doesn't mean that everything you're doing is right. You could still improve your presentation skills. You could still improve your visualization even if people are staying, right? So I would say that every single data that we get is what is the issue now for your current audience. It doesn't tell us anything about future audiences, right? So you have data maybe for the 10 people that saw you, but if you reach 10 million people, your data is going to look different because they're going to be annoyed. They're going to be annoyed by your likeness. While the 10 people, they're only caring about your outro or something, So different audiences say different things, etc.
Yeah. So do you look at the analytics at all?
Every day.
Every day.
Every day. This is also coming back to the whole gaming thing. When we talk about professional gamers and how they grind, right? And I know grinding has like positive and negatives undertones, but overall, grinding is just putting in the time and putting in the work. I could say that I analyze multiple charts every single day, very in depth, because this is also important. If you analyze 10 charts, you're only going to learn so much. But if you analyze every single day charts and charts, and you do this for years, you're going to be sitting at thousands of charts. So you've seen a lot of mistakes. And eventually, because you analyze so much data, you're going to be able to start connecting dots and like, hey, this seems to be a reoccurring pattern. So for example, every single time we transition from segment 1 to segment 2, in between these segments, if I now start talking about a sponsor, right? That's not a good timing to do that, because consistently when we do it there, the loss of interest is way higher than if we would put that ad in the middle of a segment. Like we're about to announce something. Hey, I'm going to reveal you something. But first, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the sponsor or something. Just inserting it within a segment is better than inserting it between segments. And those are reoccurring patterns that we start seeing if we analyze a lot of charts. So as much as I want to grow and scale and delegate and stuff, for me, I always say in my own company, I say it's very important that I put in the hours to do the basic analysis, and that also everybody in the company does the basic work themselves once in a while to remind themselves and also, keep getting these insights that you pretty much have.
Yeah, have a feel for the pulse of basically the algorithm and the channel and how things are going. So you mentioned, and we've talked about you being super data driven. So one part of the data, obviously, is the raw data you get.
Yeah.
But I know you also research on the side and you look at scientific studies about psychology. So how did you start with that at all?
So it was just bare necessity. So one of the issues that we have with data, and this is where I'm kind of going to discredit a part of myself here, is, data-driven approaches are flawed. We always think, oh, you're either doing data or you're not doing data at all. And the problem is data, unfortunately, doesn't tell us everything. A lot of times we don't see things in the data. The data it depends on, is the data accurate? How is the data reported? What are the data points that we get? All this kind of things. So not everything that we need to know to improve something is very easy to measure. And I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you go to a restaurant and we pick the music. Which data point are you going to use to decide whether that was the good choice of music or the bad choice of music, right? And yes, maybe the next day you change the music. That's not instantly going to change your sales, right? It might change slightly how long people stay in there, but these are very difficult things to measure. So at that point, what we are going to do is, okay, I know there's something here, but we don't have direct data from the video. How about we use other data? So that's where research papers come into play. So one of the big recent findings that we did is we wanted to understand how long should we show each visual on screen, which is what we call shot length. Is 1 second enough? 2 seconds? 3 seconds? What's the minimum that we need? Well, the data on YouTube doesn't report every single second how the audience feels. So we knew that the data was going to be fairly useless for us to use. So in that case, what we did is we looked into research. We looked into how the brain consumes content. How long does the brain take to process an image? And fun enough, there's a lot of research done behind this. So then what we can do is we can take those findings and then ask ourselves, how can we now possibly apply this to YouTube? Are there base guidelines that we can create based on research papers? So that's when I say data-driven approach, I mean whether it's the raw data from the videos or it's research papers, or sometimes the research papers are, putting it very blunt, very shit. The research methods are used are minimal. Sometimes we have a psychology paper that has a 20-person case study. So they only use 20 people. Some of the videos
psychology has its issues as a research discipline, to say the least.
So sometimes you run out of options. Sometimes you run out of options with the research papers available. In that case, I think, and I really believe actually, that line of reasoning can sometimes be enough. Because the thing is like this, with data, with research papers, we all try to be conclusive. This is the truth and the only truth. But the problem is that's not going to get you anywhere. We always have to assume that everything we think is our best guess towards the truth. So with data-driven approaches, if you're all out of options with your data, if you're all out of options with your research papers, if there's no experimentation possible in a meaningful way, then sometimes we are just like, okay, let's just think about this. Let's have a line of reasoning here. And if the line of reasoning is strong enough and doesn't have enough counter-arguments that are proven by data, then we assume that that's the current best truth or approach that we have towards what we're trying to achieve.
Well, that's the first part of the scientific method, is like just proposing a theory.
Create a hypothesis.
Create a hypothesis, test it out, see if it works.
Exactly. And sometimes the hypothesis is very difficult to test. So then the thing is like this, the hypothesis is our current reality until we finally have our data, or until we can go against the hypothesis.
But also, like, we're not talking about physics or mathematics. So it's all going to be a theoretical framework with a certain degree of probability of it being true, and it can be disproven with further research. But I like how what you do is like you take the top-down approach of like, what's the raw data, what patterns do I see, but then like let's corroborate it with like actual research, which is removing a lot of the confounding variables, and it makes it a lot more correct. It's
very important because I am a true believer, and this is I think more belief, but I believe that at the end of the day, everything is supposed to come together. And if two things conflict with each other, that means that we're missing some information, right? So what I like to do, and that's why I like research papers, that maybe I believe something because my YouTube data says so. But what if I find a research paper that conflicts, and let's say it's a really well-written research paper, it includes a proper meta-analysis and stuff, and it conflicts with what I believe, then that's really great because there's one of two things happening. Well, three things happening. Either one, my findings were wrong, or I interpreted the data differently, or I missed something. Two, the research paper was not good enough, and actually my data is actually conflicting with that one, and actually it shows flaws in the research paper, or both cases are wrong. And that gives us always some insight as, okay, there's clearly a point of improvement. And then we ask ourselves, is understanding this important for performance or what we're trying to achieve? If yes, we need to investigate this. And sometimes we get some really interesting findings.
Can you name a certain finding that surprised you?
I think the biggest, because we're actually revisiting this research right now, but when it comes down to attention spans, that was the one where research papers, there's a bunch of research papers written by very credible people. I'm saying this credible right now because they are actually credible, but when you read their research papers, it's actually bad. Research A, like for example, situation A and situation B are completely different ways of measuring the attention span and stuff. Attention span isn't properly defined. There's a lot of flaws with the research paper. So the research paper says attention spans are shortening. But the YouTube data doesn't necessarily agree with this. And also sometimes they say, okay, the attention span is X amount of seconds. They're very specific in these research papers about how long the attention span is. But then we look at the data, and the data says a completely different story. The data actually says that it depends. Let's say we're talking about a specific YouTube video. We found that without introducing a new piece of information, that after 5 seconds, people may lose interest. That's where it starts to happen already. But if you simply add music under that one, well, guess what? We can increase the length that people are willing to sit before a new piece of information. And actually, we notice this, especially if conflict is introduced, or we have a moment where we feel in suspense of anticipation, we can keep attention for a very long time. In fact, we've actually tested this as well, because experimentation and testing is part of, making sure that what you believe in is true. We had a situation where we're like, okay, we have suspense here. We're anticipating something to happen. How about we stretch the shit out of this one? So we let that scene out without any new information being introduced. We just had tense music and we set up the stakes like, oh, there's something big coming. And for an entire 2 minutes, not a single, there's probably some people that tune out, but on the chart, it showed 0% loss.
It's like flat.
It's completely flat. So now I'm like, okay, that's 2 minutes that people were paying attention. So this goes very nuanced, but the current conclusion that we have is that it's not our attention spans that are shortening. We're very good at making decisions and deciding, is this worth our time? Yes or no. And that's the thing.
You also have more options.
You have way more options.
That's what, the thing I was thinking the entire time you're presenting your case is like, I'm pretty sure in the research they played some boring video that obviously you're going to lose attention because nowadays you're exposed to way better choices. So I wouldn't say it necessarily disagrees. It's just apples to oranges. Like you're using super highly optimized content and conflict-driven video that plays with your emotions, because people go on YouTube because they're bored, so they want to feel an emotion regardless of what the emotion is, whatever they're looking for. So charged with emotion, as opposed to you're sitting in a research lab and you played a video, like you're not in the comfort of your home, which makes a huge difference. Makes an insanely huge difference.
I'll expose one of the researchers actually. And again, I'm being very careful with the word expose and stuff because again, these are credible people. They've got their PhDs and stuff. And, I cannot say they've probably done some really great work. But if you measure attention spans, the way that they measured this, and this research specifically, is they looked at a company and people behind the desk. And with the upcoming of the internet, they checked and they measured how fast would somebody change from their task to check social media or to check the emails and change screens. And they had programs to track that. And I'm like, well, that's a very, very minimal way to test attention spans, in my eyes at least.
Or rather, it's a very specific case of task switching, focus switching.
Exactly. And also, if, yes, 20 years ago, you didn't have the same access to, I mean, now as well, I can do my job, be like, okay, you know, I want 2 seconds of TikTok. Sure, I'll do it. Okay, that's interesting enough. I just keep myself entertained. Because how many people are going to go an hour long through reading emails? That's boring. So let me make that hour long reading emails. Let me mix it up with a few things that are actually more engaging. And yes, TikTok may be some brain rot, but I'm going to be honest, I do it all day. And the thing is, you know, oh, that's a fun little video. I got my 30 seconds. I'm ready to commit for longer. We're increasing our quality of life by doing so. So then to drive that back to attention spans and saying that it's shortened and stuff, I think is far-fetched.
I like a quote that I heard Sean Puri say. I think, do you know him?
I am unaware of what name.
Okay, really cool guy. Anyway, he said that he's a great storyteller, produces great content, amazing entrepreneur, podcast host as well. And he said your content, or rather your story, piece of content, story, whatever, can be as long as it is interesting. Right? Because if it's not that interesting, obviously people are going to click away, close it, whatever. But if it's really engaging, really interesting, like if you can encapsulate people, then you can obviously retain them for longer, which is exactly what Mr.Beast does.
Absolutely. I mean, if you right now look at the landscape of YouTube, and actually you don't see this just on YouTube, you also see this on other platforms because they're adjusting. We don't necessarily see that content is getting shorter. Actually, in fact, if we look, and this is also partly because of how what the algorithm wants, like there's this quote, expected watch time per impression. That is, it's something that Google engineers released in a paper in 2019, and the idea still holds true. So the idea is very simple, is the platforms want them to stay on the platform. So if you have a 20-minute content piece, it's going to be preferred over a 10-minute content piece for the platform itself. So in general, what we start seeing is a lengthening of content, and people are still willing to sit through a 40-minute video. With Stokes, for example, I think Stokes Twins is a perfect example. A lot of the content is a lot longer than 30 minutes, and that scores really well. So if the shorter experiences are more preferred by people, because, you know, we have short attention spans, we want to swap all the time, and I know that right now what I'm saying comes with some bias, I would say. But if the shorter experiences are truly the best, then it wouldn't explain why content is lengthening. It would also not explain why in short form content, such as shorts like TikTok and stuff, why there's a lot of analysis that we've done, and we found that the 40-50 second range where you have maximum 1 minute of length was preferred by a lot of people over a 15-second short. And those in general performed better for most of the channels where we did the analysis on. This was an old analysis, so maybe we have to revisit it at some point. But
I think the fact that TikTok allows now like longer videos up to 10, 15 minutes or whatever is also a testament to people preferring that. It
could be seen as a people preference. Also, I mean, sometimes you cannot get something done in a minute. Maybe you need 1 minute and 5 seconds. And now the algorithms, the platform sees like, hey, there's a lot of annoyances with the fact that I cannot add the 5 extra seconds. Even YouTube, literally, I think a week ago, is going to change to October 15th. I don't know what day is this today. Maybe
it's like exactly October 15th. So
okay, so today they're going from 1 minute shorts to 3 minute shorts.
Finally.
But, yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. Yeah. Now I don't have to rush everything that I'm saying. But it could be seen as an attestment. I think it's very biased if we said it's an attestment. I think it is more catering to satisfaction and stuff. And also, simply, yes, keeping people on the platform for longer is a great thing for the platform. So
fair point.
Let's have that as well. And I think that's just, you know, we can make assumptions, and I think it's great to make assumptions, but we always have to think about, okay, there's also platform, there's algorithms involved, and the algorithm does need a preferred output. So if that's a longer watch time, it will optimize for that. If that's more engagement, then that's that. So we're going to have to take that into consideration before we make full-on conclusions.
Yeah, I think the researchers probably find exactly what the researchers found.
Yeah.
It's like usual saying that in that specific scenario, in the context that they were examining attention span, because attention is like, it can vary depending on the context, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you still sit through a movie, so I mean, attention span for a great movie is still the same. But their findings are valid. They're just not relevant
Yes.
to YouTube and the behavior of people on YouTube.
Yeah.
So not all research is going to be valid, right?
Plus,
So-
we need to also, and this is where it gets very scientific, but we need to be very exact on what does attention span mean.
Exactly,
Is that how our brain reacts, or is that simply the amount of time that we spend on something, or like? And I think that's also where currently with most research is that most flaws in the research doesn't always come from the methods being used. It's because we're using a word without first defining the word properly and coming to a common conclusion.
Yeah,
to the
well,
word.
every time you say something, you convey a lot more than
Yeah.
you say. Anyway, that's a whole different topic. One thing that's always been fascinating to me, because I haven't seen even the Squid Games video, man. I don't watch Mr. Beast.
I'm gonna be honest, I may be gone there, but you're missing out.
I'm pretty sure I'm gonna watch it, but I think 3 months ago or something like that, a friend of mine was like, "Oh, you haven't seen the whatever Mr. Beast video?" So he played a bunch of videos, and obviously for me there was like a gap of 5 years because I've seen cumulatively like 4 videos, right? And to me, one of the most fascinating things was how fast context is being built. Because obviously to understand something, to get invested into something, you need context. And if you open a video from 2014, like the introduction is 2 minutes long until you realize what the person's going to talk about. And now like the way that the editing works, the initial image, the first words of Jimmy as a host, like in 5 seconds, you understand the premise of a very complex 20-30 minute video. And to me, that's fascinating. Do you guys work a lot on that? Is that something intentional, or is like if you follow along everything else that's in the guidelines of there was like a leaked document of how to succeed in Mr. Beast.
Never seen that document before.
Yeah, but like, is it the case that if you just follow the general guidelines, you end up with that, or is that something that you need to think about constantly when you start scripting a video?
It is quite intentional. So this is what we refer to as cold openings or warm openings. It is one of the biggest judgments that you're making. So basically, I'll explain what a cold opening is and what a warm opening is and why the warm opening, which is what you're seeing on YouTube, is more preferred. So let's begin with the cold opening and warm opening. A cold opening is when you start your video just more smoothly, more naturally, more without harsh context. So this is what you see a lot of movies, like they have this opening shot, this wide shot of like a mountain, and we zoom into the mountain and we see the mist. So there's this curiosity and this mysteriousness going on. And as we see things develop, as we see, oh, that's the protagonist, that's the main character and stuff, we start to understand the story and really get invested in it. That's a cold opening. A warm opening is where I start, hey, today I got a video about this one. Kind of how the podcast even starts, like, hey, we got a video. This is all the context that you need to know. Let's now get into it, right? That's a warm opening. We are being extremely explicit with our context that we want the viewer to have already. The cold opening, the one where we're being vague, tends to lead to a lot of confusion and also requires the viewer to already be very heavily invested in wanting to watch for a minute or 2 minutes. The warm opening just gives you that context up front so you get straight into it. And what we find in general is that warm openings tend to perform better for content because, you click on a video and within seconds, you're trying to have that second verification process. Hey, do I really want to watch this video? And with a warm opening, you're like, oh yeah, you're reminded to the reason why you clicked. You're given the context. They're building your excitement. While with the other one, you click on it, you're like, do I really want to watch this? And now you have like a 10-second scene that leaves you confused, that doesn't give you context and requires you to want to commit to the whole thing. It's a way bigger investment. So what we found is that warm openings perform better, and cold openings, it's not that they cannot perform, because they have performed. And there are variations of cold openings such as teaser clips. They would be more towards the cold opening. They can work, but in a lot of cases, they're more like a 50-50. Or they're in certain niches they work, in certain niches they don't work. So that's the reason why most creators start to go towards the warm opening, where we explicitly state the stuff, and most people start steering away from the cold openings. And actually, even with my clients, most clients, I tell them, like, just do the warm opening. I mean, you're not taking any risk. Why do you take a risk when there's a lot of other things that you could do wrong anyways?
But even the warm opening, the specific video I watched, I can't remember the exact beginning, but it was what fascinated me that there wasn't even an explanation. He was just literally got into the video. He was like, got this guy, like, give him this bag, you jump over here. But because of the visuals and everything else, he doesn't even need to say the words.
Yeah.
You understand the premise without him explaining it, which is fascinating because, as you said, like, you decide subconsciously and way before you click away from the video if it's worth it, right? It's not a conscious decision. Sometimes it is, but most of the times it's just you just lose interest and you don't know why. Just click away. So for me, that was insane. Like, I saw that, I was like mind blown.
So those openings are very interesting. I have a client that we work with that they do these not street interviews, but more like innocent street pranks. So basically what they do is like, hey, I got this iPhone 16, I'm going to sell it to you for $1. That kind of content.
Yeah.
And when we were analyzing all of his competitors, we noticed that that's exactly what they were doing. Because yes, competitor analysis is still a great starting point for channels. And this is like, let's say That Was Epic is a channel that does that. Big Doss TV, those kind of niches, they do that a lot. They start with their scene already. But that's where it's beautiful, because that's kind of a cold opening. But because of what's happening, the context, you instantly get the context. Because like, hey, do you have an iPhone? And you know the title. So you kind of don't need a lot of context. So you
already had two pieces of information, right? The thumbnail and the title.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and you use those. So in that case, it's like, okay, you're kind of getting into it. Now, that's where still it's a 50-50, right? Like sometimes it works less. So could it be optimized? Sure. So in those cases, you have a mix between where it's like, that's kind of a cold opening. And even though we're not being so explicit, it has some elements of that instant context that a warm opening has. You're just not saying the instant context, but you're kind of providing it with the situation that you're painting. So visually, we are having the information being presented to us that we need in order to understand the video. So
I think if it's not something super novel, it can work. But obviously, if it's something that people have never seen, then a cold opening like that it's going to be super hard. So you need to warm them up and explain the premise.
It's not that there's like one version that is going to work always and the other version that is going to work never, right? Cold openings can work in certain cases, but you have to be careful with them. Warm openings can work. The downside with warm openings, and because I now make it seem like warm openings are the best thing ever, but let's talk about the bad sides of warm opening. If you follow the formula, the magic formula, you sound super robotic and super scripted. And in some content, you don't want people to sound scripted. If I say, today I'm going to do this, establish context, establish goal, and hook the viewer with a confirmation, it's going to sound robotic. And that's the reason why even in the warm opening, we have to insert things as, hey, say one thing that doesn't sound formulaic, like, this is going to be exciting. And if you say that, you make it sound more natural suddenly. So warm openings are not perfect by just following 3 steps that people typically say. You still have to mess with it to make sure they sound natural and stuff. So they're not all good, and cold openings are also not all even.
Yeah, obviously it's going to depend on
exactly
on a lot of stuff. But
we have to be like, that's why I'm saying this, because I don't want people to instantly be like, think, oh, is one as good, the other is bad, because often this happens with strategy, is that you say something and if you don't give the disclaimer, then they're like, yeah, but you said it this way. And it's like, everything is context driven.
We tend to go with binary thinking. Like, that's just how we go, how the brain works. It's easier. So let's say it's 2024, as we established, 15th of October. I want to start a YouTube channel. Like, what are the most important things I should look for? And there's this common Mr.Beast advice, actually, that he said to someone, I guess, or to many people, like, do 100 videos and every video improve one thing, which I really like. But as much as I like it, I also don't like it, because it's good in the sense of, just be consistent and do better. But without direction, a lot of people are like, I don't even know what better is. I don't have a benchmark for better. So what would you suggest are the most important elements? What should people do? What should people avoid?
Yep. So I'll try to describe more what better means, because I know that these words, like make it more engaging, make it better, they're called weasel words. They seem to have a lot of meaning, but they don't mean much.
They're trivial.
I'm going to try to give more direction here. So the 100 videos and try to make each one better. I like the direction here because it's like...
I love it.
It puts...
It appeals to me.
Oh, because it puts like, hey, make content over strategizing.
Yeah.
I had one client, by the way. For an entire year of strategizing, advising him, he did not execute. I'm like, bro, why are you hiring me? Like, this makes no sense. You're wasting your money. You're wasting your time. You're wasting everything because you don't execute. Strategy is useless if you can't execute. That's the one thing. So execute first and then do your strategy. Like, obviously, execute with strategy. But if you don't execute, you're not going to get any results anyways.
And you don't have the data to work with anyway.
There's no data to work with. And like I said earlier, with data, your data is going to give you insights in what is the exact problems you're dealing with right now. You know, you could think that your likeness is the thing to fix, but maybe your whole video is filmed in a way that is just so jarring. Maybe your camera moves like this. Then obviously your likeness is the second thing we should be thinking about here. So when it comes down to, let's say we go with this approach of 100 videos and improving 1% or X amount of percent every single day.
And I'm just starting out. Like I'm
starting out.
No one knows me.
Let's pick 3 strategies that I would say, like, hey, let's have these 3 strategies as the first thing to think about. The first thing to think about is ideation, right? In the ideation state is to learn about what we call outlier theory. Now, I'm saying this one because once people get into this one, that's how a lot of channels blow up. Now, what is ideation? What is outlier theory? Outlier theory is that we're going to look around in our own niche or the niche that we want to be in, and we're going to try to identify which type of videos generate more views on average for that specific channel. So if a channel pulls in, let's say, 1,000 views, the next is 1,000 views and then 10,000 views, then we have a 10x multiplier or a outlier with a 10x multiplier. And then the other videos are 1K each as well. So that's like a great one. But if I go to, let's say, Alexa Moses' channel, and I see 100K and 100K and then 10K and then 100K and 100K, the 10K is not good enough. The 100Ks are also not good enough. We need positive outliers. So if he makes 100K, 100K, now we need to find something with 300 or 500K, and then 100K, 100K. And by just targeting those type of videos and trying to figure out, okay, how these ones seem to have elevated interest from an audience beyond their own audience. So these are the ones that could work for me because I'm trying to reach and grow by reaching people beyond my own audience. So that's the first thing that I would focus on, outlier theory. And I'll go a little bit more in depth for this theory. In outlier theory, every single idea has 2 main things. And this is generally, I would say 95% of the cases. Because there are some outliers where people have like a question mark as a title. So those would not work under this theory. But again, we generally steer away from those. So every title that you see on YouTube that we can use as an inspiration has both a format, which is the general title structure, like how to make 10 something today, right? How to make 10x today. That's the format. And then every single title also has a topic or an interest point, which is, let's say, pancakes, right? Pancake would be our topic. So how to make 10 types of pancakes today, that would be the entire title. Pancakes topic, how to make 10 types of eggs today is the format. So what we want to identify with outlier theory is which formats are consistently across many channels overperforming and which topics or interest points are overperforming even when they're put in different formats. So this gets more complexer as advice, but again, a lot of people, when they give advice to people getting into YouTube, they make it seem like it's very simple. Oh, you just upload something, put some title on it, some thumbnail. Gonna be completely honest. If you want the big views, the 100K views, the 1 million views and stuff, if that's what you desire, of course, it's
work, man. It's work.
Yeah, you gotta be strategic about it, and you gotta understand that audiences are complex. And if you want a simple strategy, you're not gonna go very far. Because every single client I work with, we go very in depth, like very deep in understanding psychology, the exact reason why is this good and why is that good. So that's number 1, right? Outlier theory is the one thing that I would learn as a beginning creator. The second thing that I would learn is to think in terms of segments and visual segments, I would say. So if you have your video, I want you to consider that humans try to be like, okay, this is the intro. Oh, this is the build up towards this moment. This is that happening and this is that happening. And kind of like a story, right? How in storytelling you have act 1, act 2, act 3, your story beats. What are each segment? So when you're scripting or you're outlining or you're trying to figure out your video, try to think in terms of chapters. And then try to be like, okay, what are all these scenes and shots that I need for this chapter or this segment here to work? Anything that doesn't deliver on the message of that specific segment, just cut it out. There's no need for it, right? And the reason why I'm saying this is because a lot of times we tell a story with so many things that are unimportant. So by removing and focusing on really like, hey, is this really important for this segment? Can I put that later or can I put that out of the video? If you're doing that, you get an efficient story. And that makes it so much more engaging for audiences. So that's more really try to understand popular structures, how they're structured from any element like your build-ups. When we get into a segment, what do we do first? What context do we give? You know, all those kind of things. That's what I would say. But this is more complex. I would say I'm still being very vague about it right now, but that's because this is a general direction. And I mean, I could talk hours about just segmentation because it's a very important thing. But understanding about structure and segments in general is a good thing to focus on and try to improve there. And the third one, and I'm going to make this one very simple actually, is just to learn to make sure that we're visualizing everything well. So when we're saying things, let's say I say, oh, there's a door. Make sure you get your B-roll shots of the door. Make sure that your camera isn't just some static camera, that you swap camera angles, for example, that you insert an image, that you add some sound effects as well that come with those images so they don't just pop on screen. If you start to improve your visualization, you're going to do way better as well, right? So that's the third piece of advice that I would give to beginners. And again, this is very beginner advice, I would say. But if you're trying to improve every single day and you're just looking, okay, how can I better visualize my emotion? Literally, use ChatGPT and ask it, how do I better visualize my emotion? It will tell you about shot sizing. It will tell you about camera movement. It will tell you about the way you could color your shots, for example. All of those kind of things can be done. And if you just focus on those and learning, you're going to naturally improve.
But also, like, yes, this is beginner advice, but you're giving a recipe, right? And I always try to say to people I talk to, clients, whatever, that I can execute the recipe and Gordon Ramsay can execute one. Which one do you want to eat, right? So it's simple, but implementing it to perfection requires practice. And even with the fundamentals, if you do them well, you can go a really long way. Like even with those basic tips, knowing how much you can delve deeper in them and, you know, optimize, you can do a good job. And naturally, YouTube wants to promote good content.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so even like I've seen people and videos perform really well without any special thumbnails or titles, just because, you know, the content underneath is good and there's a loyal following.
If people enjoy it, YouTube will promote it. Because at the end of the day, the thing that YouTube is trying to do and their algorithm is trying to do, it's not just taking your video and just promoting it and seeing how it works. What YouTube's algorithm does is very simple. It tries to identify, hey, what do you like? And then it has this database of all these videos. And it's like, hey, this specific video seems to cater to what this person wants. And it's going to match your interests with what the video presents. So if you happen to want to see a 2-hour video of just a guy standing still cooking without any camera changes and anything like that, maybe that's the one thing that you like. YouTube will find that video for you, right? Now, most people don't like that one. There's still a subgroup that does like that. Most people like the very high-paced, very visualized content. But that's where, as a creator, you decide for yourself, who's my target audience? Who do I want to be my target audience? And how large do I want my target audience to be, right? So if you think a Bob Ross painting, right? I'm going beyond YouTube right now. Bob Ross painting for a lot of people is not very interesting, but it's the most widely appealing painting that you could have. And that's why there's like so many copies sold. But sometimes you have these simplistic modern art paintings. And yes, maybe it doesn't appeal to many people. And that's why people are very confused to why they're so, but they appeal to 1 or 2 specific people. And that's the same thing what you're doing with your video, right? What do you want? You want 100 million views? Well, you're going to have to make everything as widely appealing as possible. Nice colors, nice aesthetically pleasing, the camera, all that kind of stuff. But I think example of some people who do these workout videos that is like 30 minutes, just raw taking you through my day of my workout. Those can work for a very specific audience who prefers that type of content at that time.
Yeah, obviously, like because you have the internet, right?
Yeah.
You can connect people all around the world that have those fringe interests, and maybe in your block you had like 2 or 1 or 0 in your town, but now like because it's a global world, you can gather all that attention. That's kind of like the theory of 1,000 true fans.
Yeah.
I don't know if it still holds today, but I find it...
I would say it still holds.
Yeah, I would say so as well, but some people oppose it. Doesn't matter. So what about like the traditional elements and stuff that people talk about, like click-through rate, average watch time and stuff like that? Does it matter at all?
So the reason why I'm laughing is you have a lot of strategists and a lot of experts, and I'm being cautious here because I have a very conflicting opinion here, and I don't want to piss people off unnecessarily, but a lot of people who talk about that don't have a clue what they're talking about. And why am I saying this? Let's talk about click-through rate. So click-through rate is a measurement of people are shown your thumbnail and how often are people clicking when shown your thumbnail, right? So it's a great measurement because, you know, it's something we want to optimize for, right? If somebody comes to our website and somebody sees our product, how much do they click through to our basket or something like that? It's a great concept. But the thing is, I guess, is that we have to make sure that the click-through rate correlates to what we want. So this means that people say like, oh, make your click-through rate 10%. But then my question is a higher click-through rate, does it actually lead to higher views? Right? The actual metric, if that goes up, not the concept of click-through rate, but the measurement, does that correlate together with your success metric, which is views? If CTR goes up, click-through rate CTR, does view go up? And when we actually do that analysis, we do not find that to be true in 99% of the cases. Actually, in a lot of cases, we even find that if the click-through rate goes down, the views go up. And it's like, wait, it's causality and stuff, and we can talk about those kind of things, but to keep it very simple, because I want to simplify this one. Basically, what happens in the simplest term ever is that if your video is good, YouTube might believe that it appeals to more people than it usually appeals to. But even though it appeals to more people, well, that doesn't mean that those people are less likely to click than your 1,000 true fans. Your 1,000 true fans may have a 100% click-through rate, right? That doesn't mean it's better, because maybe your video just didn't get suggested to all the other people that it could have been suggested to. So that's for that reason alone, that metric becomes very messy. And I can tell you is that there's a lot of videos with 100 million view, what? More than 100 million views. Jesus. So there's a lot of videos like that, and I can tell you those click-through rates barely hit the 3-4% mark. While most experts would tell you, like, you need to hit your 8% or your 10% or something like that.
Well, it's like, the thing is, like, these are heuristics, right? But a heuristic is not an algorithm. So it's not going to be exact 100% of the time. Otherwise, you wouldn't even have the outliers that you're looking for in the beginning. And, like, the way I explain it later, because like you told me that, and I was like, wait, that makes a lot of sense. And in our Discord, there's like a lot of discussion, people giving advice on YouTube. I'm like, that's actually wrong. Let me tell you why. It's like we as people sometimes are so fixed in percentages that we forget to think in absolute terms. And like 3% of a billion impressions is way more than 10% at 20 million impressions. So the thing is like how many impressions you have, and then, okay, sure, the higher the click-through rate would be better, but you're better off optimizing for impressions.
Yeah. So talking about impressions, actually, this also contributes to click-through rate. So the click-through rate argument argues that we need to hit a certain percentage. But if I show you a video, are you always going to click on it instantly? No. Sometimes it requires me to show you the same video because I know you're going to watch it. But I know it might take you, sometimes it takes you 3 times to see that video before you click. Sometimes I might have to show you that same video 10 times before you click on it. A podcast, a lot of times, people are not going to click on it instantly. They're like, oh, I don't have time, 2 hours long. I can't do that right now. But later at night, they're going to watch it. Or maybe that specific night they're busy, so they don't have the time. So then YouTube will keep on recommending that same video to you. CTR as a metric doesn't account for that at all. Or at least we cannot identify. We don't have unique viewer CTR or something. We don't have those metrics. So if we had those metrics, then maybe we see a correlation. Who knows? So, and the problem with these kind of metrics, and by the way, we can talk about AVD as well, average view duration and stuff. They all kind of follow a similar pattern where there's not a lot of correlations going on or relationship with views. And for that reason, those metrics become very useless for an analysis. And this is the reason why I said as a metric and not as a concept. Because yes, the concept of making people want to click more is a great concept. I can't deny that, right? I mean, if I said that was that was bad, you can tell me that I'm a dumbass, you know. But at the same time, it's really the concept here of the metric as a number is not accurate, and
well, it's not an accurate representation of what you absolutely want to understand, right?
Yes.
So it's good, but it has its purpose, and so as far as it completes its purpose, it's not perfect, right?
Yes, and unfortunately, it's so imperfect that we cannot use it at the moment.
And it's also the case with average view duration, right?
Average view duration has a similar issue as well. Average view duration, that's the problem with average view duration. It doesn't account for video length, so that's your problem there. But then YouTube has a magic metric. They have average view percentage, which does take into consideration that. But then even there, it doesn't account for types of videos. It doesn't account for segments. It also doesn't account for the reach that you have. So some people say, actually, I'm going to quote some very large creators. They say you have to hit 70% retention. I can tell you right now, that is not true. Even those same people who say that, I've seen their retention or their average view percentage. They do not hit 70% on their videos. So this is also one of the things that with those metrics, and this is what sometimes people forget, is that some people are not very truthful always about those things. They want to sound good. It sounds better if I give you advice, hit the 70%. It sounds way better than if I say, doesn't matter.
Also makes it unlikely that you're going to reach whatever they've achieved.
Oh.
Because if you optimize for this, and that's your whole point, maybe you won't be able to grow at all.
I can tell you this. If you want 100 million views per video and you try to hit 70%, you will fail. I have more examples of 100 million view videos with 30 to 40% than with 70%. And I'm saying this as an example because this is the thing. It's not because somebody credible or somebody with a large following or something says a certain number that's the magic number you need to hit. They're also human. They're also biased. They don't always have the full picture either. They work with analysts who look at this as well. So I'm saying this because, again, the simple advice is all of those metrics, before you use it, check if they correlate with your views. If not, don't even use them. Right? And then maybe once every few months, check them again to make sure that your analysis was well, or try to understand the nuance, or maybe there's like a different type of analysis that you could do or maybe you can multiply one with another or something like that, which hasn't given us good results so far. But I would say before you use it, make sure it correlates. If it doesn't, don't use it and focus on other things.
So what do you use as data for your analysis? Because we pretty much swept everything under the rug.
Yeah, this is pretty much like the entire scene up in the trash.
It's like, here's the YouTube analytics. Well, that sucks. Let's not use it. Let's use something else. So what do you use?
So I use views a lot because views is a success metric that we're trying to chase. Now, views is not perfect, but again, a video with 1 million views, we could say that objectively has performed better than a video with 100,000 views. So views is a great metric in my opinion. So
for example, in the case I proposed to you, if I start making videos and one of my videos 10x's, then I should go back and study like what exactly did I do, what was the topic, did a good opening, how long was the opening, did I do good segmentation, what was my build up? So like study your own material is what you're saying.
That's the first step, right? Okay. I mean, there's still some flaws to that step because maybe it's a video that you don't want to make too much of, but there's still some context to be given. But the general approach of chasing outliers and chasing things that have overperformed and learning from successes is a great thing. This is the same reason why if we want to be a great business person, we're going to analyze some of the people with the best companies, right? That's what we do as well. The same counts for videos. And then the second thing that I look at is I like to look at the retention chart, but not the percentages, but the simple chart behavior. So I know when do I keep people engaged and when are people tuning out. Because it doesn't matter if it goes down 1%, 2%, or 3%. It matters if people are tuning out, something isn't good enough. If people are staying, something is clearly going well. And if you have that simple of a mindset and you do that over hundreds or thousands of charts, well, eventually you're going to figure out what people like and what they don't like, as a general means, of course. That's the second thing. There is a third thing. Sometimes when we go more granular, like new versus returning viewers, or if we look at how long people watch per region and stuff, so we go very granular in the advanced analytics, sometimes we can get some insights still. Or like, hey, our channel is supposed to appeal to male and female, but 95% of our audience is male. Well, in that case, clearly you're doing something wrong that is not appealing for the females. So now we want to investigate what that could be. So that's how we can use some of that data as well. So that's what I mainly look at, which I think is a very reasonable thing to look at. And all of those things correlate also with success, because views is the success metric. The retention chart, nobody can argue the metrics. Down bad, stay up good. And the granular things give us some information in very specific scenarios. Now, what I will say is this. Currently, as well as behind the scenes, there's a lot of talks with the YouTube team where we give them advice or they ask us for feedback on their systems. What metrics do you want? What is that? YouTube is still in its infancy, and so are all the other platforms. And we're still actively talking with the platforms to get access to certain metrics or make sure that, hey, this metric isn't good, but if we do it this way and you report this data to us, we will find it useful. But all of those things, conversations with such corporations are slow. That's not like, hey, I say like, hey, I want this, and the next day you get it. That could take months or sometimes years.
Nice. So in essence, there's like 5 things you should do. Obviously, thumbnail, title, super important, but we already covered at least the title. Like you mentioned, the outlier theory formula. And the only thing I think we didn't cover was the thumbnail. And I feel like that's also important.
Yeah, thumbnail is actually a lot easier than most people make it seem. Some people are like, you need this complex visual, you need this or that. There is 7 main... I'm going to have to try to get this on top of my head here. Yeah, a lot of times I have my research papers in front of me, because if you have 1,000 things to remember, you're going to forget something. So you need to go back to your papers. But in short, right, a thumbnail, we know that aesthetically pleasing thumbnails overall perform better than thumbnails that don't look aesthetically pleasing. You don't have to go for that, but that's one of the elements that we could have present. So typically what we do in that case is like, hey, make our thumbnail aesthetically pleasing. Next is clarity, right? Sometimes with our thumbnails, we want to do clarity, right? So with a thumbnail, if this means that we're going for the typical compositions. Let's say in podcast content, you have one face here, other face here, and then in the middle, you have either a talking point, a sentence, or something like that. It's a composition that people are very familiar with, and it quickly grabs attention and gives the information that the viewer needs to understand, do I want to watch this, yes or no? That's really what the thumbnail is trying to do. It's aimed to grab your attention, maybe generate some initial interest, and then have us go to the title and be like, okay, is this something we want to watch, yes or no? That's the main purpose of thumbnail. So we do clarity through compositions. We did aesthetically pleasing. I'll mention a few more because I don't think I'm going to get to the 7. I'll try.
No worries, man.
We got the personal branding, right? Branding, not personal. Branding in general. This could be color usage. Maybe it's a stylistic choice. Those things are really great at grabbing attention.
Using the same fonts.
Using similar fonts. Because what happens is when we're on the main screen of YouTube, for example, and we recognize your thumbnail, it's more likely to grab our attention, right? We know that faces naturally grab our attention faster than no faces. That doesn't mean that no faces cannot work, right? But faces really good at grabbing attention. So is text. Text is actually... People tell you, avoid text on thumbnails. Text is really great at grabbing attention. So text should not necessarily be avoided. We should make sure that it's short enough so that people don't have to spend 5 seconds reading your thumbnail. So they can just look, I'm interested. So these are just some of the elements. And there's a few more, but these are some of the elements. When you put them in your thumbnail, they increase the likeliness that somebody's going to pay attention to your thumbnail and give it the time that it needs to then read the title, make the decision to watch your video, and then get into your video.
Nice. So we covered basically everything.
The basics.
Yeah, well, everything to begin.
Everything to begin, yes.
And make your first 100 videos.
Oh, for your 100 videos, this is more than enough.
Try to improve a single element on any of those things. Every single video, as Jimmy said, Mr.Beast said. And then I guess you would enjoy quite some views. Because I feel like that's super hard to do. Like if you try to do it properly and improve every video, it's like a full-time job.
Absolutely. Also, one of the big things is that the difference between getting 1,000 views, 10,000 views, 100 and more, there's different things that you need to focus on. So, for example, I got a client. He's a soccer channel or football. And basically, at some point, he was doing these impossible trick shots where, you know, he has to do a trick shot in the goal. And we talked about what needs to be done. And I told him, like, what do you want? Do you want 1 million views or 10 million views? And obviously he's like, I want 10 million views. So it's like, okay, then you cannot do your trick shots in your backyard because it looks cheap. And the thing is, yes, there are videos, by the way. I think, was it Chris MD? Maybe. I think they have trick shots, or Rotoshaw. They have trick shots in their backyard that do really well and have millions of views. But the thing is, I guess, optimization at the highest level is about decreasing your chances to hit lower views and increasing your chance to hit higher views. So I told the guys, do you want 10 million views? You're going to have to find me a stadium with at least 2 rows that people can sit on so it looks impressive. So when people open the video, they don't just see you in the backyard and are like, am I really interested in these trick shots? Or they see that good old YouTuber here figured out a way to rent an entire stadium just to do a trick shot. That's going to impress and make people be like, wow, right? And that wow factor, actually, in the very blunt terms, I always call it the holy shit factor. If you can't say holy shit, it's probably not good enough for 10 million views. Right? To consistently every single time get 10 million views. So in his case, I told him like that. That decision to go from backyard to a stadium is not important if you're trying to get 10,000 views or 100,000 views. But that is a crucial decision if you're trying to go, you know, to 10 million views or even 100 million views. 100 million views, sometimes those things become unacceptable if you don't have those.
Yeah, I mean, what we do all the time is we assume an identity and assign an identity to the environment. It's called the agent-arena relationship. And people do that constantly so they don't pay attention of how amazing it is. But you realize it. Like there's like an insight into what's going on that's subconscious. For example, if I go into a basketball field, basketball court, sorry, but I'm wearing my football shoes and what I would look dumb, and people immediately know that, and I know that, right?
Yes.
Because they're assigning me an identity. They know the identity of the place. They're like there's like an agreed upon context and agent arena relationship. So if you're in your backyard doing trick shots, like that's not the right arena to be doing like the insane trick shot, right?
Yeah, you're going to get probably a backflip or something, but you're not going to get the one from a helicopter.
Exactly. Also, like when what happens, what I would think would happen is if I see like helicopter, whatever, trick shot, that type of thing, and I look at your backyard, I immediately think of myself, this is probably not going to happen or it's going to be boring. Like there's less of a chance of it happening. But if I see a professional football field, even though it's not conscious, I'm going to think, well, this guy spent a lot of money. He's going to make it happen. It's going to be epic. So I'm going to stay and watch that video.
Dude Perfect does that.
Yeah.
They do that with their trick shots. They get helicopters all the time, and you know you're in for a treat.
Yeah. And I never really thought about that until you just mentioned this. Although I know the concept and everything.
Oh, yeah. But it's they're doing amazing. Like, their trick shots is not... Like, it started in their backyard, and that was great initially. But if you want to pull, like, 100 million views, I mean, these are insane numbers. Like, you can't get away without that wow factor. Right. Well, the more you want, the more you have to put in terms of energy and everything else. So obviously you have a lot of insight into psychology, into everything we just mentioned up until this point. What are your most, let's say, surprising learnings in terms of human psychology from your YouTube strategy career? Because I remember, and I'm not sure we can talk about this, but I remember you said something about some scenes that were cut from some videos that cost a lot of money, and the reasons why they were cut, and to me that was like unfathomable.
but it sounded really intriguing. So can you give some examples of like your best psychology insights?
So I'll talk to you about two scenes, and I'm gonna be descriptive but vague enough. So there was one scene specifically. Okay, let's say you won some prize, and maybe there was 3 parts to the prize, and you got very emotional about this one, and we escalate and we give you more and more and more and more and more, right? That is not always a good thing. So one of the things that I learned that really shocked me is that a lot of audiences don't care. They just don't care about your emotion unless we've really built you as a character, and but even then it's super, super tricky. So one of the things is that you won this challenge, here's the car. The single seconds these keys touch your hand is the second people lose interest.
Because there's closure?
There's some closure, yes. Yeah. So that emotion that you have, most people just don't give there's no care. Like for a lot of people. Or they're like, oh, okay, whatever. They don't want to see that after reaction stuff. So imagine that then I start giving you more stuff, right? For most people, they've already had their closure. They don't care about the emotion. They don't care about the escalation of the reward that you're getting or the extra reaction that you're having. So what I realized there, and that was it surprising? Not really. But was it like an eye-opener, like, damn, ruthless, of that people generally don't care, or like a lot of people just don't care. They're just like, I'm here to see a cool story. Once the story's over, I'm out. That is definitely an eye-opener, I would say.
So how do you go about it? Let's say I win a car in a challenge. So how would you edit that, and what would you do to not lose the attention of people?
I give you the car. I show you a quick emotion of you being excited, and I'm like, that was it. And bam, we move on. That's it. And
to the next segment or to the next video?
Well, in this case specifically, if you won the prize, most of the times, since it depends if you have a segmented video where it's like you have many challenges, then it's to the next segment. But if the entire video was a challenge and this was the big prize, then you move on to the next video at that point.
So the key takeaway is like not giving that much time for the emotional expression of people. Just like, cut to the next interesting scene, because people just want to be edged perpetually, I guess.
Yeah, actually, I'll tell you. Most people talking about that. You know how people always talk about, okay, we all want these dopamine hits and stuff. Actually, yeah, this is an interesting insight. So when we play slot machines, right, in casinos and stuff, typically we feel excited not because of the wins. We feel excited because we anticipate a win. That same thing happens also in video content. If we anticipate the big moment, that's where we really get excited. That's what's fun. The journey towards that big moment is fun. But once the big moment happens, it's like, yay, and then, okay, we're done. Same with a fight scene. I mean, how many times have you watched a movie and you get to the end fight scene and you've been living up to this moment, and then once they're fighting, it's like, okay, this is just another gunfight. You know how it's going to go. The big guy, like, the bad guy's going to do this. And you're already losing interest when the fight scene just started. Is that journey towards it. And we can even see this, by the way, in research papers. We can see elevated dopamine levels and stuff. And again, I'm not going to say that I'm the most well-spoken on hormones and stuff. But the thing is, what we see is there in the research, we already start seeing the people get excited and stuff. And those feelings are often very crucial to make people just want to have an experience.
Yeah, I think people misuse dopamine and its effects because it's kind of like, I'm going to use simple terms, it drives you towards a behavior. And there was like a really good analogy that dopamine is like a boat that you use to go to whatever you want, but as soon as you reach the destination, the boat goes away. So immediately, like, your anticipation, your drive goes away. It's more like, anyway, let's not talk about neurotransmitters that much, but this is interesting. So what are some other insights into human psychology? Obviously, what you just mentioned previously about how long do people pay attention visually, so how long cutscenes should be, that stuff is super exciting. I think you mentioned something like how many words per second can the brain recognize, or let's say assimilate. So not having too much text, but not having too little text. Yeah, like those type of things are super curious to me.
I think one of the one of the insights, actually, I mentioned earlier shot lengths. And I think this is less psychology. I just think it's an interesting insight, really. That when we investigated shot lengths, what we realized is that we can take a shot of the video and we can break it down in these individual components and the amount of components and the complexity of a shot. And what we realized that in a very simple shot, so for example, if we just zoom in on you and there's no background or anything yet, then we need at least half a second to a second to interpret that one, to properly process that shot. And if we cut faster, which a lot of creators do, by the way, they show something, flashes of something for half a second. The problem what you're going to have is that your brain is going to get cognitive overload and you're going to have lots of information. And when there's lots of information, you get confused. And when you get confused, you lose interest. There's like a lot of steps, but that's what happens. It's very interesting. With a complex shot, where there's a lot of things going on. So let's say you have a shot of me and you. We're interacting. I'm giving you something. There's a lot more going on. That could take 1 to 3 seconds for me to properly be able to process this in my brain. So let's say we have a lot of complex shots and I show each shot only for 1 second, for example. Same thing happens. Too much information enters my brain, right? My brain goes into cognitive overload. I get confused. When I get confused, there's lots of interest. And those insights I thought were very interesting. Now again, those things are very nuanced. And the question always like, but how am I going to apply this in my own content creation process? Well, very simple. Don't show a shot less than a second. If you're going to quick flashes, respect the amount of time that the human brain needs to properly process something before you move on to your next shot. And this affects cutting speeds, for example. So that's what I found interesting. That's like, I think a few months ago, we started looking into that one. And we've been adjusting and changing entire videos, the way they're cut, simply because we understand like this shot needs about 3 seconds for a person to properly process, right? Why are we showing this only for 1 second? They can't even properly process it. Now, when I say about processing, this again gets more complex because we can talk about processing. But yes, if I, after a short shot, have a long shot, then technically I can still process that previous shot. So it gets a little bit more complex than that. But if I'm just cutting like this way too fast, you have that very jarring feeling. And where I found this to be interesting, because this is a lot of scientific explanation. So how do we draw this back to the reality? At some point, there was a creator who asked me, like, I'm cutting the same as this guy. Like, but his stuff is so jarring. And we're kind of cutting the same. I'm like, well, you're not exactly cutting the same. What is happening is you have the same amount of shots, but his shot lengths are way shorter. And that's why his feels jarring. If he would have extended the length of his shot lengths, suddenly it would feel normal. And those kind of insights I thought were very interesting. Now, again, this is the really nuanced stuff that we're thinking about at the higher levels, but that's what really makes me excited. When my researcher told me about this and he was like, hey, here's the research, I was like, damn, it excited me. So
nice. We also talked about the methods that you guys use for YouTube analytics and strategy. Apparently, they work cross platforms and cross formats, because we talked about in the car on the way here, we talked about like all these concepts working surprisingly well on Twitter as written text. And I'm not surprised, to be honest, because as we talked more and more and more, you need to write out everything first, like the entire video. And the only difference is that YouTube is a visually dominated platform, but you're literally reading the script. So if the script works, the video's got to work. Obviously, there's like another piece, which is the visual representation. So I'm not surprised it works on Twitter, because it's basic storytelling to a very high level, what you guys are doing. But how do the more, let's say, advanced topics work on Twitter and other platforms? Like, for example, what you mentioned about the brain needing a certain amount of time to process, maybe just spacing out sentences, using shorter sentences. I guess those are the differences, but still.
Yeah, so a lot of research overlaps with writing, like writing books, for example. We can learn a lot of that for video content, especially when it comes down to script writing and sentence structure and stuff. So talking about Twitter or X, at some point there was a very large profile, and he reached out to me and he was like, "Hey Mario, can we try to figure out if your strategies work?" And I was like, I don't know, but I want to try it out. I want to see what happens. So he had a tweet, and it was a tweet that wasn't that long. I think like I'm going to guess right now, like 300 characters or something, right? So it was a fairly short tweet. And what I analyzed, I was like, okay, we don't want too many concepts in a singular sentence because then we get confused or we get lost or it's harder to understand things. And it's not that simple. So it's like, okay, you know, your tweet, you have this one sentence and there's 3 concepts in this one sentence. It's way too many. Let's break them up into different sentences. Then in that same tweet, what this person had is that he had a reference to a specific city in America. I'm like, just cut out the city name and just stick to America, right? Because that city name could influence the appeal to people who may be interested in that city. But maybe you don't like New York. Maybe I do. Who knows? We don't know.
Or it's a smaller city and I'm from whatever, Eastern Europe. I don't know about that city. So now I'm like wondering what the city is. And
exactly.
Then I'm confused.
We did exactly that. Also, in the image, he showed a person who was not... He took an angle or a picture of this person that didn't make this person look that good. And the thing is like this, somebody's look can influence the likeliness that somebody's going to interact with it. So we adjusted a few things there and stuff, and pretty much we reposted that same tweet with the major adjustments in the text and a minor adjustment in the images. That tweet did 5 times as good in terms of impressions. And that's like... That is one of the examples of just taking the same concepts that we have on video content and applying them to text content. And I think that's an attestment that at the end of one of the showcases or case studies here that shows at the end of the day, we're just optimizing for humans. Whether it's video content or text content, you're just optimizing what do people like, what confuses people. It's simple concepts. Progression, how fast do we progress to our point? Visualization, how visual are we? Clarity, how clear is the message that we're presenting? Pacing, all of those things are what we're optimizing for. And all of those things they're present in businesses, video content, text, etc.
I think also people forget that video starts with text, at least good video. At least if you want to do like a lot of views, is if you just go in front of the camera and try to talk randomly. Okay, if it's a podcast, sure.
Yeah.
It can happen because the person comes with the story, so the story is naturally developed throughout the video. But if you just want to do a talking head video and you don't have a script, it's not going to do it nowadays.
For most people, it won't unless the person themselves, and this is the thing, is like, some great speakers, they're like, oh, he's a natural. No, he has just really learned to talk in a way.
He's practiced it.
Yeah, he knows how to talk. He intuitively now gets the principles. And I'm going to be honest, like, I'm not perfect at it, but if I go on and I repeat a point for myself, my brain is always like, you're repeating yourself. Like that, and that's what you learn in retention is repetitiveness is really bad at keeping people engaged, right? It's good for learning, but really bad at keeping people engaged. So for that reason, every single time you get repetitive, you start reminding yourself. So great speakers, great podcast hosts, they can just go on because they know what will bore a person or when they will be bored.
Yeah, it's fascinating also, like good podcasts, or rather, let's say, because my initial thought was Joe Rogan, but let's use another case. Let's use stand-up comedians. Mm-hmm. What they're really good at is establishing context extremely fast and giving you the punchline and then continuing again with the progression. And like the good stand-up comedians, if you watch a good special, it's a masterclass in exactly this. All of these concepts are present. The more you talk about them, the more you realize that there's an overlap. So yeah, everything starts with writing.
Absolutely. And even comedians, by the way, comedy is seen as something super subjective. But if we really look at the science of it, we can even take it down. Like a good comedian knows that, hey, exaggerations are funny. Like inherently, we as humans find something that is exaggerated funny. So a comedian, maybe they intuitively do it, maybe they don't. But if they know like, hey, exaggerating makes people laugh. And we can take it as well. If we want to be more funny in our text or our videos, well, exaggerate something beyond an acceptable normal. And we know that humans are going to be more likely to laugh at that one. But if our exaggeration isn't big enough, then people are less likely to laugh with it. You know, and exaggeration is one of the many points that make something comedic. You also have that, like you have general diverting expectation, you have mismatching. There's many factors. Comedians, whether they are intuitively doing this one or it's a comedian because he has generally studied how to be funny, They just look at the main components, apply those main components, but those main components apply everywhere.
But first they need to write down the jokes.
If they cannot intuitively do it, then yes, you write down the joke. Because if you intuitively do it, you need to be like, okay, I need to exaggerate something. So, okay, and then they say it. So some people are really great on the spot to exaggerate. Yeah. Some people are not great. I'm not
But
great
also even the best comedians bomb. So like even when they do it intuitively, they just go through many iterations and exactly what you do, they do. Like what made the people laugh? What kept their attention? Was this bit too much? Was this too long? Let me shorten this. So they do exactly the same optimization again and again and again. Rinse and repeat over like small clubs until they reach the necessary material for a full-length special.
Absolutely. There's different ways to optimize, right? There's optimization. I love this optimization of you do something, if it flops, you adjust a little bit, you do it again. You know, I love that for anything that I do. I'm just like, throw it at the wall. If it doesn't stick, we'll change it a little bit and see if it sticks next time. I really love that because it's the grind mindset. It's just put in a lot of work and you'll be fine.
I think that's also the most efficient. It's kind of like evolution.
I'm not sure if it's the most efficient. I think it's the easiest. I almost consider it the lazy approach. Even though you spend a lot of time into it, it's less strategize heavy. I think the best approach for optimization is analyze the situation, go theoretical, understand how humans do something, fully understand the theory, and then create a solution from this newfound theory. That's the most efficient. The problem is it's exhausting to your brain.
That's not beginner friendly though. Like
it's not beginner friendly at all.
The context I was speaking in was like I mentioned in the beginning, like 100%. If you're going to do the 100 videos over and over again, do one thing better. Like in that case, in that context, is the most efficient. Otherwise, yes, if you're a strategist, obviously, the other thing is also good. But there is something to be said about even if you study quite a lot and you read the research paper and you think about it, like, yes, that's good. It's amazing. But you need to, in parallel, practice to get the extra data. Because sometimes it contradicts. Sometimes you don't understand there's confounding variables or the context is different. So I think people who do too much theory and rely too much on just like, let me study the fundamentals. Again, if it's not STEM, physics, sure, like, then they miss out. They miss out on additional data that you don't have. It's not captured in the studies.
You don't know the variables that you're dealing with. Like sometimes you'll have a variable that you didn't account for and that you are not aware of, until you implement it. And you're like, oh wait, I forgot about this thing. And you only remember that, or you only think about it because you're practically implementing it, right? Theorizing, and technically speaking, yes, you could just theorize something and make it perfect. Well, perfect. But the thing is that how are you going to know for a fact that you get all the variables right? And that's one thing I learned about research. And there's this guy called David Deutsch. He's somebody to look into. He talked about knowledge and stuff, and I thought it was very fascinating. And what I took from his stuff is that when we try to find a truth, or whenever we try to find a research or theorizes about something, our goal isn't just to get it perfect. Our goal is to progress towards perfection. That's the main thing. It's all about progression. So the thing is like this: if you have a theory, maybe that theory is more exact than mine. But the whole point of research is to get the most exact practical thing. Because that's the point of research, is to be able to implement it afterwards, right? And sometimes, yes, we'll have situations where it's very difficult. But maybe I'm saying, hey, this is great. Maybe that's the best voice line. And you say, yeah, it's not good for all these reasons. Well, then how am I going to change it? If you don't have an answer for that one, it's good for me to stay with this until you have a more practical insight. And that's the thing with theorization, is that people try to make things perfect, but people don't try to make things as perfect as practically allows you to make it. So that's the thing with theory, is that you have to think, okay, I have all this theory. Now, how am I going to make this practical? Right? And then a lot of times it's like 90% of your theory just goes straight down the trash. Because it's unusable.
Some studies are mechanistic. They might focus on one thing or over-exaggerate one thing, and it's not relevant to a real-world life scenario, because that's not what the researchers want to study. They want to see if there's an underlying mechanism, and then do a study that's more relevant to real life. But a lot of people use those, like the first type of studies.
Yes.
And they like extrapolate to real world phenomena, and it doesn't work. And obviously it's not going to work because that wasn't the point of the study. You need to understand the methodology quite a lot. So I get what you're saying. It's completely valid. Also, there's like a different way of knowing. Do you know the 4E theory of cognitive science? It's like the 4 ways of knowing.
You'll have to remind me of this.
Okay, it's. I think that the person who popularizes this the most is a Canadian psychologist. He's called a cognitive scientist. Sorry, called John Vervaeke. And the way he explains this is there's like 4 kinds of knowing. So you have propositional knowing, which is what we rely most on, which is factual, scientific study, facts, right? So we focus only on this one, but we're missing out on all other 3 which are important. So the second one would be procedural. So knowing how to play the piano, for example. Like I can read all I want about playing the piano, but like I'm never going to actually be able to do it unless I practice it. And for example, doing the analytics, doing the videos, doing everything else, like the actual practice helps you connect with the propositional so you can have more knowledge, right? You have more data points because you read about it, you also done it, you found yourself in a different context. Then you have perspectival knowing, which is having the perspective. For example, you can never know what it is to be a parent before you're a parent. Like it's absolutely impossible. You can think all day about it, all year, like your entire life. It's impossible because the change that this will induce in you is absolutely unpredictable. And it's the same when you think about it, about going viral. Like you don't know what it is like for people to know you everywhere, to stop you in the middle of town. You can't even go to a restaurant like a normal person. Like you can't know it. And the last one is participatory. So to know something, let me rephrase that. Participatory knowing is like knowing by being a part of a whole. For example, the simplest way I can give as an example, although John gives probably better examples, is like when you retell a story and there's like you've experienced it with a bunch of people and some other people weren't present at that story and you're all laughing and there are other people not really laughing. Like, what are these guys doing? And like, oh, you had to be there. You had to be there. If you weren't there, if you didn't participate, it doesn't hold the same meaning for you. So that's why I feel like the entire, theorizing / mental masturbation of just acquiring information, propositional information, I'm intentionally not saying knowledge, is not as good as also having the practice, because the practice is what's going to introduce you to the other types of knowing. So the procedural, the perspectival, and the participatory. Because now, let's say if I've done 1,000 videos and I have the, let's say, 100,000 subscribers and I have the silver YouTube play button, I participate in a category of people. I know their problems. I know what's relevant to them, as opposed to, let's say now, because you don't have that button, so I don't know, might know to an extent. So that's why I feel like the other route I would criticize more of just theorizing way too much.
I think one of the reasons why people like to theorize is not because they're not able always to do the practice. It's also because of fear. I think the problem is the fear of being wrong. So, and what I mean with being wrong is like, what if your theory is wrong and now you have to face the consequences and you got shit views? All right, that's scary and that sucks. But the thing is, like, is that I've also had to deal with it. Like sometimes you do something, in theory everything is wrong, and just because of one variable that you missed, now suddenly you have to go back to the drawing board. But it's not just the going back to the drawing board that is like scary. It's the fact that now you're public about it. Like people saw you fail. And I think those factors also hold people back. And that's why it's like theorizing is in your comfort zone. There's nothing scary about it. Like you could be wrong and you're not facing the social consequences that you would face if you theorized everything, then you put it online, you were wrong, you flopped, everybody saw it, nobody has seen the theory that you put behind it, all the thought and work. They just see the outcome of it. And I think that's scary feeling. Also the reason why most people just focus on theorization and don't implement.
Or just going in front of the camera is scary for a lot of people. It was super scary for me like 10 years ago when I started. Now it's like second nature. but it took some time to get there. Also, like, there's variables that are hidden underneath so much stuff that you wouldn't imagine. For example, no one in the US is probably facing this problem, but we're in a small country, right? Bulgaria, it's a super small country, which means that the weather is homogeneous. It's the same in the entire country. So imagine the views on a sunny day, which is a part of a holiday. Like, no one is on YouTube. Everyone's out on the beach or in the mountains. So this is not really relevant for English channels, because like you can watch an English video everywhere, or if it's the US, like 51 states, like the chances of let's say Ohio and Hawaii having the same weather, well, maybe high, but you know what I'm saying.
We can see this. We can see this even. These are like the seasonal trends or like the event trends, right? Like back to exactly. On YouTube we call it back to school days, right? Oh, everybody goes back to school, and it happens to be in certain countries it's on this specific day, on other countries it's on this specific day, and we see viewer behavior change on those moments.
We can see in our e-com store, like if I show you just the graph of sales, daily sales, I'm pretty sure you're gonna pick out which days are first of the month and which days are Mondays. I'm gonna show you can see it immediately, which is pretty funny. So yeah, that's also like a factor, and sometimes people don't get it. Like obviously it's not gonna be relevant to bigger channels and to people in larger countries, but it is a factor. Let's say a bank holiday or probably elections in the US are messing at least with the Facebook algorithm quite a lot.
Yeah, it's on big channels, it's those disrupting factors, let's call it like that. On a smaller scale, they're going to affect you more, right? Because, I mean, there's smaller things like, let's say, an event in Bulgaria specifically. If your audience is Bulgarians, then obviously that's going to mainly affect that one. On a global scale, we would think, it's going to less affected because there's more countries. But there are certain events that also happen worldwide that will affect.
Global events.
Yeah, global events, Christmas, for example, Halloween, those kind of things are more global, so you're going to see more impact. New Year's, for example. I mean, these are mostly the bigger holidays or anything, God. But I mean, U.S. election is a global event for a lot of niches, and that will impact it, even though it's just U.S. Or let's say an explosion happened, or let's say there's an asteroid coming, that's going to impact it. There's many. I'm exaggerating right now, but those impacts, if they're global, they're going to impact the larger channels as well. But I have to say here that most of the times with those channels I work with, we don't have to worry about any of those kind of things.
Well, they're more robust because they're more diverse, have more following from different countries.
Yeah, so the impact is going to be less.
The impact is going to be less. But for example, even though it seems unnatural for most people, but the US elections, for example, are going to change how things work, at least for a while, in the entirety of the Facebook and whatever Meta algorithm. So Facebook ads here are going to be affected by whatever happens in the US until the election passes. At least a running theory. We'll see how it goes. So it's really interesting. It's really fascinating to talk about hidden metrics as well, because obviously there's like the apparent metrics that you can see, like views, whatever, people in the video, captions, even tags, whatever underneath the hood. But there's those like so much hidden metrics and coincidences and global events that might contribute, that the point I'm trying to drive is even if you flop in one video, I wouldn't necessarily see it as a flop. I would see it as like, why did this happen? If it's just 1 out of every 50 videos, it's just the odd coincidence that I can't factor in. If it's every single video, then obviously it sucks. So, or if it's every second video.
I have an example actually. Yesterday I was analyzing a creator that I work with. They have a format. Now it's been working amazing for them. It's like basically it is ages 1 to 18 as a format, like a challenge type of video. And normally their videos, these type of format would score them their solid up to 10 million views. For them, 10 million views is like a good video. Anything when it comes out to the 2-3 million views is like an average, below average, etc. So this video that they make a few that were great. They overperformed, so they kept on doing that format. And now suddenly they had one that underperformed. And typically what somebody does, it doesn't work anymore, let's step away from this one. So I was like, hey, how about we do a proper analysis before making any conclusions? And what we found is that the thumbnail was fine, the title was fine, most of the presentation and the production value of that video was way better than usual. The only thing that was very difficult to measure, we did happen to see signals to this in the data. It's not that the data says like, hey, this is the specific issue. Is that we noticed that the actual events, so this was like a cheerleader video, were so focused on just the movements of cheerleading that the interest in this video was limited to people who are just interested in the cheerleader moves. And this is what I'm going to give you as an example. If I tell you, let's say you're interested in cheerleading. Maybe a backflip might be interesting to you. But let's say you're not interested in cheerleading. A backflip, 50% chance that you're going to be interested. But if I tell you like, hey, I'm going to shoot you out of a cannon and you're going to be doing a backflip, are you going to be you're going to be interested?
Yeah, I want to see that.
Exactly, because it exceeds the initial interest of that video. So I'm not going to lose your interest simply because I show a backflip, a front flip, all of those kind of things. I'm showing you cool things. And in this video, they just under-delivered on that little thing there of like over-delivering in the widely appealing segments. And that was the reason why the video flopped. And I'm saying this as it was very difficult to measure. It's not like an exact data point that says this is the issue, but after analysis, we identified that that was the issue. That was the reason why it flopped. Such a simple thing. And sometimes we have videos where, let's say normally you do a 25-second intro, but in this one you did a 50-second intro and you over-explain things. Well, those added 25 seconds could lose you 5 to 10% of your audience. If you tell me that that's not going to impact the performance of that video long-term, I mean, that's massive.
Yeah, especially when you think about how YouTube distributes videos. So initially, if there's like low interest, it's not gonna show it to that many people. You're gonna lose impressions. So
you lose 5 to 10% of your audience in the initial seconds. YouTube is going to take that as a signal that this video is not as interesting. And that was just 25 seconds that were just unnecessary. So you can cut that out and bam, suddenly the video does well. Like,
so what do you do with those videos? Do you reproduce them and focus on a better element? Do you cut out those extra 25 seconds and re-upload, or just take it as learning for the next video?
I take it as learning for next video because again, yes, maybe that might have harmed the performance of that specific video, but most likely there are many other elements and stuff. So real fixes are so big that most of the times let's just move on, take it as learning, not do it again. There's only very rare cases where we re-upload. I think in the 4 years that I've been, no, actually it's more than 4 years now. I think it's nearly 5 years. In the time that I've been on YouTube, I've had one video that we had to re-upload. No, actually two. One was that somebody got punched in the stomach and that was not liked very much. So we had to cut out that segment. Now, good thing you have the YouTube editor, but the YouTube editor doesn't always work that, like, it doesn't smoothen out the edit. It doesn't polish the edit. So in this case, the video got taken down, then re-uploaded, right? This was very fast. Did it work? Like, did it improve the metrics of the video? Well, in this case, it pretty much got some issues with YouTube's algorithm as well. Okay. Now, we also had a case, and this was with a creator who uploaded the video and video went trending instantly. But after X amount of hours, this was within the first day, it went up and then flatlined in terms of views. And that's where we were like, something is wrong here. So we noticed there were some scenes that were borderline community guidelines. We simply cut those out, re-uploaded it. That video went trending again, but this time didn't flatline. So that video did fairly well after all. So these are rare cases where you re-upload something, but most of the times, because you actually are like, okay, we need a fix because this is clearly something is bad going on. But in most cases, you just suck it up and just go to the next one. And only if, let's say I say something and let's say I do research the next week and that new research conflicts with what I said, then maybe you can remove the video, but that's more to make sure that your brand image or that people don't get misinformation and stuff. So you could remove for those kind of reasons. But most of the times, I mean, you just suck it up and just deal with it.
Got it. YouTube doesn't like re-uploads?
YouTube doesn't
care.
Doesn't really care because it's going to identify every single video as a new video pretty much. It might see some overlap because it can spot those kind of things. But we haven't seen any bad bad consequences from re-uploading and re-editing a video.
Got it. So like we talked before the conversation about your vision, about your company and its how it's moving towards more and more being a let's say a think tank, a research lab, where you will cover not only YouTube but other platforms. Obviously now successful on X. You implement a new strategy on LinkedIn, as we talked about, YouTube, like you're omnipresent and producing for all platforms. So naturally you're learning and extrapolating from one platform to the next. What are your focuses now in terms of research?
So my focus, and that's what I also tell my employees, that I want to take these broader concepts that people assume we know a lot about, look into the research and see, are there certain changes we want to make? Did we get it right? Did traditional media, for example, get it right with their shot sizing? Are there different approaches? And I want to reinvestigate some of those things, come up with new knowledge. And that's what I tell my company to do, is like, our company is a research consulting company. We do the consulting so that we have revenue to sponsor any research that we just feel like doing. So that's the, you know, a lot of companies do research because it has the purpose of increasing revenues or anything. That I'm just building this company because I just want to do some cool research. I want to put 100 people in this room, check their brain activity whenever I show them a brand deal, and figure out, hey, is there something we can learn about this that makes people, you know, more excited about a brand deal? Or let's say these intros. We're like, okay, we want to understand the differences in cold openings and warm openings, and we want to be more exact. Well, let's measure people's brain activities. So that's the kind of company that I'm building right now, is where we take the initial data-driven approach to understand humans when they consume online content, and now we're going to expand this and try to also understand the same behavior for other platforms, text formats, video, even watching movies. The goal is, I have my company in 4 stages, I always say. Right now, we're mainly focused on YouTube and platforms alike. Then the second stage is that the goal is that the company is going to take those findings and bring them more to marketing. That's the big goal, because I think marketing can benefit very much from the insights that we get.
Yeah, for sure.
So but again, I want to take it easy, right? This is a 20-year plus journey. So we're taking it very slow. Also, I'm not used to running a company. Like I'm a strategist who played video games. Like I have to learn, like right now I'm learning to be a CEO. It's not easy. That's what I've learned. So stage 1, online content like YouTube and video content. Some text formats we're actually dabbling into that one, and we're actually succeeding there, which is good. Then marketing. Then in the next stage after that, we want to actually bring these insights and see how they apply to movies, longer formats and stuff, like TV shows, and see if we can take those and optimize those experiences with the data that we now have these days to optimize those experiences. And then after that, the goal is that we take all of our research and we start to put it into education. Because what we believe is that traditional education right now, and especially when we talk about audiences and online content, is flawed with so many false beliefs and research that didn't have a good basis, or is like 40 years old when the internet wasn't even around and stuff. So we want to then take our research, insert it there, and then make it more publicly available.
That's a massive undertaking.
It's a long journey.
Undertaking. But it's awesome. I like people who have grand goals. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Yeah. That
was my thought, is like, I'm very fortunate. I will give that. Like, when I started this industry, I was just a guy with $0 on my name, just a guy who played some games. You know, I made a living playing games, but I'm going to say, if you're a professional gamer, you don't make $1 million a year. I will tell you that, unless you're maybe faker or something. There are some people who make that, but especially at that time, yes, you may be playing the biggest game, but you're going to be looking for your rent. So I'm very fortunate right now because of the people that I work with and the scale of the videos that I work on, that we have the luck with the company of revenue. I don't have to worry about financial means for a very long time, right? So that makes it that I can take those risks and just chase this. Maybe an impossible, who knows? But I can chase this great goal. Worst case scenario, I just go sit back, you know, have fun time with my family and play games all day long. If I really wanted to, I could do that, right? And that's where I'm saying, like, I'm very fortunate that I'm in a situation where I have the means to do this kind of thing. So I want to take that advantage and now chase these things. That's what I said in the company as well. Let's try this. Let's do some research. If it loses us money, then so be it. Then we'll make that money back with more consulting. But I think for me, it's so much more exciting to think about that you could create a piece of knowledge that wasn't there before, that now people have access to, rather than, $1,000 more, $1,000 less in my pocket the next day. Like, I don't need much in my life, I need a house, a computer, and some good food. And maybe once in a while, I like to do a small little trip. But other than that, I get excited by the research. I get excited by the new findings.
I love it. So, what you're currently researching with your team? Like, do you sponsor research? Do you do it in-house? Like, what are you...
Yeah, so we're currently doing mainly... so at the moment, we are focused more on attention spans, because I said I want to start tackling this one. And I want to also get some papers. I want to get some papers published. I told my team this. So right now we're doing a few meta-analysis on attention spans to then identify how we can do our own research. But I'm also... There's two new projects that we are going towards. Is one, we're trying to get involved with more universities. So we are doing some active efforts there that we can starting up some actual researches or experiments, let's put it like that, and where we just fund it. Now, these are not going to be massive budgets, because the growth of the company is still important, and we're not at the stage where we make 100 million a year or something like that. So we can't just throw any money. But I want to start throwing money towards research that I support. And then the second thing is that right now we do have a lot of focus on AI. And the reason why about that one is because consulting companies, if you're just doing consulting and you're not focused on generating new knowledge, AI becomes a threat to that one. If you're just going to rely on like humans versus AI. So right now we are also trying to figure out, okay, how do we envision our company to be like 5 to 10 years from now, when AI can do a lot of processing that we cannot do at the speed as humans? And how do we supplement our own skills of investigation and gathering data and then make those things work together? So those are our biggest efforts that we're doing right now, is starting to do more research with universities and stuff, or initial efforts, let's put it like that. And two is like really trying to understand how to integrate AI in the entire research processes.
Nice. So where can people find more about your company, your services, or your socials? What do you want to leave for the end of this video?
I think just Twitter. I'm going to be honest, like my socials are probably the best that we have right now, because my company, we're not public at all at the moment. You'll find some random ass website that we paid some guy for, and we're like, hey, just make a website. So right now, the best, if people want to find anything, is I got a YouTube, I got a Twitter, I got a LinkedIn. Some of those we're just starting and repurposing, but that's where they're going to stay mostly up to date. And if we have some cool things that we're gonna be releasing, those are the platforms. And I'm always saying, if I find something cool, X is like my personal Facebook. So if I find something cool, I'm gonna post it on X. If we have a cool research, I'm just gonna post it on X, and then the rest is just repurposing. So
X is the place to follow Mario on. Yeah. Is it at Mario Joos?
Mario Joos with 2 S's. But if you type my name, it will probably pop up. So
okay, perfect. I'm gonna leave it down in the.
Oh yeah, that's the best.
Yeah, in the description anyway. But just for reference, it would be better. Man, that was a very interesting conversation. I hope you had as much fun as I did.
I love talking about these things. So
yeah, I'll guess we'll speak soon again as well, because there's like a lot of interesting stuff that you're doing. I think it was very insightful, even if you don't plan on having a YouTube channel. Yeah. Just the way you tackle problems, the way you analyze. I think it's very, let's say, relevant to other stuff like business in general, because we have a couple businesses, and in all of those, look at the analytics exactly the same way you do. Like what keeps people retained in the subscription service business, in the supplement business, like everything. Yeah. So super insightful. I'm going to take a lot of that and try to introduce it into my content. Obviously, podcasting is it's a bit harder to do a lot of those things, but this was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, we'll see you again.
Absolutely.
Cheers.